Barack Obama, George Bush, John F. Kennedy, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and Ratan Tata. 3 former American presidents and 3 billionaires. But what's common between all 6 of them? This institution, Harvard University, a prestigious private university in America, also the richest and oldest in the country. Every year, thousands of students apply to get into Harvard, but only a select few make it. Today's video is about the showdown between Harvard University and a person who clearly does not like this university at the moment, US President Donald Trump. He thinks Harvard has become a joke and, like many American universities, needs some sweeping changes. Harvard has refused to pay heed to his orders on these changes. It said the American government is trying to gain control of the university altogether. And Trump does not like this defiance either. So he has gone ahead and made some drastic moves, including stopping government funding of over $2 billion to the university. The latest threat by Trump to Harvard is to stop the enrollment of foreign students in the university. And this showdown is just beginning to unfold. Hello and welcome, I'm Shubham Chauhan. Let's get started. First, here's some context as to why Trump is suddenly going after Harvard and other American universities. In 2024, several universities across America saw large-scale student protests. Harvard, Cambridge, Yale, Cornell, top universities became a platform for students to raise their voices. These students were calling for an end to the Israel-Hamas war. On October 7, 2023, Hamas attacked Israel, killing about 1,200 people. Israel then began its retaliation by invading Gaza. More than 52,000 people have been killed so far, and that war continues even as we speak. Students on American campuses raised their voice over the suffering of ordinary Palestinians, called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The students, that is, they called for a permanent ceasefire and also questioned the United States for their continuous support towards Israel. Many protesters urged their colleges to cut ties, financial ties, with Israel or companies profiting from its invasion of Gaza. In some cases, classes were cancelled or rescheduled, and some institutes even chose to work in a hybrid manner. A New York Times report says in about 20 universities, police made more than 800 arrests. Several students were suspended or threatened with disciplinary action over their participation in these protests. As these pro-Palestine protests gained a lot of attention in American colleges, some Jewish student groups and pro-Israel groups said these demonstrations were promoting anti-Semitism. In other words, saying that these protests are against Israel and Zionism, which calls for a separate Jewish state on Palestinian lands. However, pro-Palestine protesters rubbished these claims. In the latter half of 2024, Donald Trump, who was the American presidential candidate for the Republican Party, criticized these pro-Palestine protests in America. Now, the crux of his argument was this: top American universities, especially Harvard, have become spaces for what he calls woke and liberal leftists. He says American campuses cannot be a space to promote pro-Hamas sentiments or any radical thoughts under the garb of activism. In fact, Donald Trump for a few years has been promising something called a free speech policy initiative. It vowed to shatter the left-wing censorship regime, in part targeting college campuses as well. So when Donald Trump took office in January 2025, he started making moves in that direction. His administration began revoking the visas of more than 500 students, faculties, and researchers at over 80 universities and colleges in America. In February, he announced the formation of a task force. Its aim is to eradicate anti-Semitism from campuses and make them safe and fully accessible for Jewish students. Around 60 universities are under review of this task force. 10 universities, including Columbia, Harvard, NYU, UCLA, and UC Berkeley, are under a special review of this task force. These universities were given 2 options: follow strict guidelines laid down by the government, else forget the money the government gives them each year. And so began the fund cut. Columbia University saw $400 million of federal funds being frozen unless it met the demands of the White House. Princeton University saw a $4 million cut. $1 million was for Cornell, $790 million from Northwestern University, $175 million from Trump's alma mater, which is the University of Pennsylvania. Harvard, of course, saw the biggest cut, a $2.2 billion freeze on its federal fund. Some decided to follow White House's direction, some universities that is. Columbia, for example, tightened its protest rules and firmed up disciplinary measures and also launched a review of its curriculum on West Asia. Now here's a question that you may have. Why does the American government give money to these rich Ivy League colleges? You see, around the Second World War, that is 1945, US President Harry Truman was given a recommendation. The recommendation was that the US government must give out grants to American universities to promote research and innovations. So this practice of government grants, the federal grants as they call it, began since then. In 2023, for instance, the government allocated nearly $60 billion in grants to universities. For many institutes, this money is a crucial lifeline. A pause or stop in any way in government funding has led to jobs being cut, key research on issues like health being stopped, and just an overall big question mark on what's next. Which brings us to the case of Howard University. Last week, the White House shot a letter to the university saying what it has been to other colleges as well, that follow our guidelines or we'll punish you. Reportedly, the Trump administration demanded that Howard close all diversity and inclusion programs, share various admission details with the government, report foreign students who commit or conduct violations to federal authorities, and even ban face masks on campus, presumably to identify protesters whenever there are any. The university shot back, saying that they do not approve of these changes. Alan Garber, who is the president of Howard, said, "The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. The administration's prescription goes beyond the power of the federal government. It violates Howard's First Amendment rights and exceeds the statutory limits of the government's authority under Title VI, and it threatens our values as a private institution devoted to the pursuit, production, and dissemination of knowledge. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue." Other universities and even Harvard alumni like Barack Obama praised Howard for standing up for academic freedom and pushing back against Trump's order. Donald Trump, of course, was not happy one bit with this reply from the university, and so he has decided to double down. The Washington Post reported that Donald Trump has asked his team to cancel Howard University's tax-exempt status. Like I said in the intro, Howard has also been threatened by the government that enrollment of foreign students would be stopped. Now, one of the views in this saga and Howard's courage is what many call entitlement. That is one of the views that a lot of people are putting out, that Howard can afford to stand up because they have the bank balance to do so. Now, Howard alone receives about $9 billion in federal funds by one estimate. $7 billion goes to the university's 11 affiliated hospitals in Boston and Cambridge, and the remaining $2 billion goes to research grants directly for Howard. As per the Washington Post, in fiscal year 2024, Howard's federal funding of $686 million made up approximately 68% of the total sponsored revenue of Howard. So if you stop giving this money, which Trump has done, Howard has other avenues like fees, investments, donations, etc. In fact, if you just look at endowment numbers, Howard has the largest among US universities at $53.2 billion in 2024 alone. That is higher than the gross domestic product, or GDP, of almost 100 countries. But there's a catch. 70% of this money is earmarked for specific projects, which is said to be the norms, the 70% figure that is. Basically, Howard has to spend the money the way the donors have directed them to, or else the Howard University management may have to face legal consequences. So any decisions by Trump going forward could have a serious bearing either way on the financial health of Howard University. Now, whether Harvard's management decides to stand by its academic freedom stance like it has, despite the fund cut, or eventually decides to give way and, of course, permit whatever Trump and his administration is saying, it would be very interesting to watch which way does this premier university decide to go. That's all we have for this report. Thanks for watching.